Picture this: 74,000 years ago, the sky turns black, not for a day, not for a week, for years. A supervolcano in what we now call Indonesia has just erupted with the force of 1,000,000 atomic bombs. Ash blankets the entire planet, global temperatures plummet, and somewhere in Africa, a group of humans, maybe 10,000 of them, maybe fewer, huddles together against the volcanic winter. This is the moment we almost didn't make it, and here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Every single person alive today, all 8 billion of us, descends from that tiny band of survivors. We squeezed through the eye of a needle, and then we conquered the world. Welcome to SAPIEN, where we explore why humans are the way we are, from our ancient origins to our modern minds to the future we're building. Today's story is the most improbable chapter in human history, the one where we almost went extinct. Let's start with a weird fact about you. You and every other human on this planet are genetic clones compared to chimpanzees. No, really, 2 random chimps from different parts of Africa have more genetic differences than you and someone from the opposite side of the Earth. Humans are bizarrely, almost unnaturally, similar to each other. Why? Because at some point in our past, our population crashed so hard that we became an endangered species. For decades, scientists pointed to one catastrophic event: the Toba supervolcano. Around 74,000 years ago, Mount Toba in Sumatra exploded with such force that it launched roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and rock into the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, that's about 2,000 times more material than Mount St. Helens. The theory, proposed by anthropologist Stanley Ambrose, went like this. Toba triggered a volcanic winter that dropped global temperatures by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius for years, maybe even a decade. Ecosystems collapsed, food chains broke down, and anatomically, modern humans, our direct ancestors, got pushed to the brink. The hypothesis suggested we were reduced to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 breeding pairs. An hourglass bottleneck, nearly the entire future of humanity squeezed through that tiny genetic pinch point. And if that story sounds dramatic, well, that's because it probably is. Modern research has walked back the Toba catastrophe theory pretty hard. Paleoclimate data shows the eruption caused severe regional problems, sure, but not a global apocalypse. Archaeological sites before and after Toba show continuous occupation, human tools, human camps, human survival. Toba didn't wipe us out, but here's what the genetics still tell us. We did go through severe bottlenecks, multiple times. Our population was small, fragile, and hanging on by a thread for tens of thousands of years. So the question isn't whether we nearly went extinct. The question is, how did a species that nearly vanished end up everywhere? And if you're wondering how a group of barely surviving humans managed to take over every continent except Antarctica, stick around, because the answer involves a narrow ocean strait, a whole lot of coastline, and some very questionable decision-making. Oh, and if you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells YouTube that humanity's near extinction is actually pretty interesting content. Alright, so here's the setup. Around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, a small group of anatomically modern humans is living in East Africa. They're not thriving, climate is brutal, resources are scarce, but they have one advantage. They can think symbolically, plan ahead, and cooperate in ways no other species can. And then, something shifts. Maybe it's climate, maybe it's population pressure, maybe someone just looked at the endless savanna and said, you know what, I bet there's better stuff over there. Whatever the reason, a small band, possibly just a few hundred people, starts moving north and east toward the Horn of Africa, and they arrive at a place that will change everything, the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. Today, this strait separates Africa from the Arabian Peninsula by about 30 kilometers of open water. It's called the Gate of Grief because of how many shipwrecks litter its currents. But 60,000 years ago, we were deep in an ice age. Sea levels were 100 to 120 meters lower than they are now. The Gate of Grief wasn't 30 kilometers wide. It was more like 10 to 15 kilometers, maybe less. And it was dotted with islands you could hop between. Still not easy, still dangerous, but doable. And so they crossed. A tiny group of humans, carrying the entire genetic future of our species in their DNA, island hopped across one of the most treacherous waterways on Earth and stepped foot into Arabia. At that moment, they were no longer just African apes. They were something new. They were global. Now, here's where the story gets wild. You'd think a small, struggling group of refugees from a population bottleneck would take their time spreading out, maybe settle down for a few thousand years, build up numbers, get comfortable. Nope, these people moved fast. Within 10,000 to 15,000 years of leaving Africa, modern humans had reached Australia. We're talking about a journey from the Horn of Africa, down the Arabian coast, across South Asia, through Southeast Asia, and all the way to the edge of Oceania. And they did it by following the coasts. This is called the coastal migration hypothesis, and it makes perfect sense. Coastlines are resource-rich: shellfish, fish, seabirds, freshwater river mouths. You don't need to adapt to new climates or figure out how to hunt unfamiliar megafauna. You just follow the buffet. And because they were moving along coastlines, they could advance a few kilometers per generation without even realizing they were migrating. Over millennia, those small incremental movements carried them across continents. By 50,000 to 45,000 years ago, modern humans had reached Papua New Guinea and Australia, crossing open ocean to get there, by the way, which means they had boats. Meanwhile, Europe, the place we think of as the birthplace of civilization, wasn't even fully occupied by modern humans until around 40,000 years ago. That's right, our ancestors reached the other side of the planet before they bothered to move inland into cold, Neanderthal-infested Europe. Which brings us to an important point. They weren't alone. Quick aside, if you're realizing that everything you thought about human migration is way more complicated than you learned in school, subscribe to this channel. We're just getting started with the weird stuff. So our ancestors are spreading across the planet, and in the process, they're meeting other species of humans, not Homo sapiens, other kinds of humans. In the Middle East and Europe, they encountered Neanderthals, thick-boned, cold-adapted, and incredibly intelligent. They'd been living in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. Farther east, in Siberia and Southeast Asia, they met Denisovans, a ghost lineage we only discovered in 2010, known mostly from a pinky bone and some teeth. But their DNA shows up in modern Melanesians, Aboriginal Australians, and some Southeast Asian populations. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Our ancestors didn't just meet them, they interbred with them. Genomic studies show that non-African humans carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some populations carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That mixing happened between roughly 65,000 and 47,000 years ago, shortly after modern humans left Africa. It wasn't a lot of interbreeding, just enough to leave traces, enough to give us some of their immune genes, their altitude adaptations, their cold tolerance. And then, within a few thousand years, both Neanderthals and Denisovans were gone. We don't know exactly why. Climate change, competition for resources, disease, or maybe they just got absorbed into the much larger population of Homo sapiens spreading across the landscape. But here's what we do know. By 40,000 years ago, we were the last humans standing, the only ones left. Now, here's the genetic twist that makes this whole story even stranger. As those small groups of humans spread out from Africa, they carried only a subset of the original population's genetic diversity. And then, when smaller groups split off from those groups, they carried even less. This is called the serial founder effect, and you can see it in the data. African populations have the highest genetic diversity of any humans on Earth. As you move farther from Africa into Europe, Asia, the Americas, genetic diversity drops in a nearly straight line. It's like playing a game of telephone with DNA. Every time a new group splits off and moves farther away, they lose a little bit more of the original message. By the time modern humans reached the Americas, crossing from Siberia into Alaska roughly 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, they had the lowest genetic diversity of any continental population. We are, all of us, the product of a tiny inbred founder population that got lucky. So let's bring this full circle. 75,000 years ago, humanity was teetering on the edge of extinction, maybe because of Toba, maybe because of climate, maybe because of bad luck, but a small group, 3,000 people, maybe fewer, survived. And then they did something remarkable. They left. They walked out of Africa, crossed deadly straits, followed coastlines into the unknown, met other species of humans, and kept going. Within 30,000 years, they had conquered every habitable continent except Antarctica. Today, their descendants fill the Earth. 8 billion people, all of us cousins, separated by no more than a few hundred generations. We divide ourselves by race, by nation, by language, by belief. But biology tells a different story. We are an almost impossibly young species, an almost impossibly similar species. We are the descendants of the luckiest survivors in history. The person sitting next to you, genetically, they're your 500th cousin. The person on the other side of the world, your 1,000th cousin. We grew too big for the house, but we started in the same tiny room. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. If you want to explore more about where we came from, why we're like this, and where we're going next, subscribe to SAPIEN. This is just the beginning of the story. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're only here because your ancestors were the luckiest people who ever lived. See you in the next one.